The world held its breath for a clash of titans. On one side, Kash Patel. A man carved from the marble of modern power, his words weapons, his gaze a contract. On the other, Ibrahim Traoré. The young, quiet leader of a nation reborn in fire, a man whose silence was heavier than most men's speeches. The stage was set. The cameras were live. But no one, not the seasoned host, not the global audience, and certainly not Kash Patel, could have prepared for the truth that was about to be unleashed. They expected a debate. They witnessed a reckoning. And it all began with a single, impossible sentence that broke the world. Mr. Patel, the voice of Ibrahim Traoré was calm, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the studio lights like a blade. Before we discuss the price of uranium, let us first discuss the price of a promise. Specifically, one made by a tailor named Devji to my great-grandfather under the light of a Sahelian moon a century ago. The air crackled. Kash Patel, a man who never flinched, froze. His face, a mask of calculated confidence just a second before, went blank. The color drained from it. His mouth opened slightly, not to speak, but in the shape of a silent, primal scream. The world wasn't just watching a political interview anymore. They were watching a man's soul being laid bare, live, for all to see. Don't you dare look away. Don't even blink. Before we show you the moment a political giant was shattered by a ghost from his family's past, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to witness is a story they will try to erase. And you need to know it happened. The silence in that room was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a living thing. A heavy, suffocating blanket woven from shock and disbelief. You could feel it through the screen. You could taste the ozone of a lightning strike. Elizabeth Vance, the host of Global Crossroads, a woman who had stared down dictators and calmed markets with a single, well-timed question, was utterly lost. Her polished composure, for the first time in a decade, had fractured. Her eyes darted between the two men. Between the ghost and the machine. Kash Patel's hands, which were resting confidently on the polished table, were now clenched into white-knuckled fists. A vein throbbed in his temple, a frantic drumbeat against his sudden, chilling stillness. He looked like a statue of himself, one that was beginning to crack from the inside out. He had walked into the studio as a predator, a shark gliding through the familiar waters of geopolitical debate. He was here to dismantle the young African leader, to expose him as naive, a revolutionary out of his depth. He had his talking points memorized, his attacks sharpened. He was ready for a fight on his terms. But this was not his territory. This was something ancient, something personal. The air hummed with the unspoken. Traoré hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't accused. He had simply opened a door. A door deep in the past, a door Kash Patel never even knew existed. And now, something was walking through it, right into the sterile, air-conditioned glare of a television studio. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Kash finally stammered. The words were stones in his mouth, heavy and clumsy. His voice, usually a resonant baritone of authority, was thin, brittle. This is an absurd, transparent tactic. A fantasy. We're here to discuss substantive issues. The stability of West Africa. International trade. Not fairy tales. He tried to laugh it off. A short, sharp bark that held no humor. It was the sound of a man trying to slam that ancient door shut. But Ibrahim Traoré didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, patient, and deeply, profoundly sad. As if he wasn't looking at an opponent, but at a lost child. A fairy tale? Traoré repeated softly. Is the ground beneath our feet a fairy tale, Mr. Patel? Is the blood in our veins a fairy tale? History is not a game. It is the soil from which we grow, or the dust to which we return. He leaned forward, not aggressively, but with the quiet intensity of a teacher. My nation, Burkina Faso, means land of the incorruptible people. We are a people who understand that a man's worth is not in the title he holds, or the wealth he accumulates. It is in the promises he keeps, the promises his father kept, the promises his father's father made. Patel shook his head, faster this time. A desperate motion. This is preamble. It's meaningless philosophical garbage. Elizabeth, are you going to allow this? He turned to the host, seeking an ally, an anchor in the storm. Elizabeth Vance found her voice, though it was strained. Captain Traoré, she said, her professionalism a life raft she clung to. Mr. Patel has a point. Can you please clarify the relevance of this story to the discussion at hand? Relevance. Traoré's eyes never left Patel's. It is the only thing that is relevant. Before one can be a leader of nations, one must first be a leader of oneself. One must know oneself. And you, Kash Patel, you do not know who you are. That name, Kashyap, the formal, the ancestral name. The one he had boxed up and put in the attic of his past, along with everything else that didn't fit the sleek, Americanized brand of Kash Patel. Hearing it spoken in this context, with this weight, was like a physical blow. He recoiled. You don't know me, Patel snarled, the raw anger finally breaking through the ice of his shock. You sit there in your military fatigues, a man who seized power, and you dare to lecture me about identity? I am an American. I am a patriot. I built my life from nothing. My family came to this country with nothing and we achieved everything through hard work and dedication. That is my story. That is my truth. Is it? Traoré asked, his voice still maddeningly calm. You say your family came with nothing. Are you sure about that? Did they not bring their hands? Their minds? Did they not bring their memories? Or did they choose to leave some memories behind? Like a traveler who discards a heavy bag, not realizing it contains not stones, but bread for the journey ahead. The metaphor hung in the air, beautiful and deadly. Patel felt it sting. He was being methodically, surgically, dismantled. This wasn't a debate, it was an exorcism. Every word Traoré spoke was designed to peel back a layer of the identity Kash had spent a lifetime constructing. The self-made man. The powerful strategist. The man who advised presidents and kings. All of it was being rendered meaningless, trivial, in the face of a story about a village tailor. Let me tell you about this tailor, Traoré continued, ignoring Patel's rising fury. He wasn't speaking to the host anymore, or even to the camera. He was speaking directly to the man opposite him, and to the ghosts that now crowded the space between them. His name was Devji. He did not live in a grand house. He had a small shop, with a wooden door that was always open. His fingers, they were not soft. They were calloused, pricked by 1,000 needles. But those fingers could weave magic. He was not just a tailor. He was an artist. He stitched patterns that told stories, patterns that held meaning. He used a special kind of thread, a secret of his family, dyed with colors made from rocks and flowers from his homeland, Gujarat. But his most unique thread, the one that made him famous in that small corner of the world, was a thread he got from a trader from my land. A thread spun from the fibers of the kankuran tree, which grows only in the Sahel. It was strong, resilient. It shimmered in the light. This thread connected our two worlds, Mr. Patel. Long before you and I were born. Patel was silent. He had to listen. To deny the story now, to interrupt, would look like fear. And Kash Patel was never afraid. So he sat there, a prisoner in a Gucci suit, and listened to the story of his own past, a past he never knew he had. In those days, Traoré went on, his voice taking on a rhythmic, storytelling cadence. Life was hard. A famine came. The rains failed. The earth cracked open and offered nothing. Devji, the artist with the magic fingers, could not feed his family by selling beautiful things to people who had no bread. He was a proud man. He would not beg. He was on the verge of losing everything. His home. His honor. He was thinking of taking his family and walking away, becoming just another nameless, landless wanderer. To disappear. Traoré paused. He let the image settle in the silent room. The image of a man at the edge of the abyss. An ancestor. But he was not alone, Traoré said softly. My great-grandfather, whose name was Ousmane, was that traitor. He was not a rich man in the way you would measure it, Mr. Patel. He had no gold. His wealth was his word. His currency was his honor. He saw the despair in Devji's eyes. He saw the dignity struggling beneath it. He went to Devji's shop, not to collect a debt, but to offer a partnership. He told him, "Your skill and my resilience, your art and my routes, we will weave them together. I will not give you fish, but I will help you weave a stronger net." He proposed a venture. They would create a new kind of product. Garments for ceremonies, for chiefs and holy men, embroidered with Devji's art, using the thread from my land, and sold along the trade routes my family had protected for generations. A joint venture. A partnership of equals. One from India, one from Africa. Bound by skill and by trust. Patel's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Confusion, anger, and a tiny, terrifying flicker of something else. Recognition. A story heard in childhood, perhaps, dismissed as a fable. A whisper on the edge of a dream. They sealed this pact, Traoré said, his eyes boring into Patel. Not with a written contract, not with lawyers and clauses. They were men of a different time. A different substance. They sealed it with an oath. An oath spoken under the sky. Devji placed his hand on a piece of his finest embroidered cloth. My great-grandfather placed his hand on a simple stone from his village. And they spoke a promise. That their families would forever be bound by this act of mutual respect. That the children of the tailor would never forget the children of the trader, and the children of the trader would never forget the children of the tailor. That their prosperity was now a shared tree, grown from two different seeds in the same soil of honor. Traoré slowly, deliberately, reached into the pocket of his military jacket. The movement was mesmerizing. The entire world watched his hand. He placed a small, dark object on the table between them. A worn leather pouch, stained with age and 100 years of touch. It lay there, on the gleaming, modern table, an emissary from another world. My great-grandfather gave Devji a pouch just like this one, Traoré said, his voice dropping again to that intimate whisper. And Devji gave him one in return. It was a vessel for the promise. A physical reminder that their fates were now intertwined. My family has kept this pouch and this story for 4 generations. It is our most valuable possession. It is our moral compass. It reminds us that true strength is not in domination, but in partnership. That real wealth is not what you have, but what you share and the promises you honor. He looked directly at Kash Patel. The moment had come. The final, devastating turn of the key in the lock. Devji, the tailor, the artist, his full name was Devji Soma. His son, who watched this promise being made, who learned the trade and the story from his father, was named Lulu Devji. When the time came, seeking a different future, Lulu and his family made the long journey to America. A new world. A new life. And in this new world, he felt he needed a new name. A name that sounded stronger, more common. A name to help his children fit in, to help them climb. So he chose a name that spoke of land and property, a name of status in his new home. He shed the name of his father, the tailor. He became Lulu Patel. A collective gasp seemed to pass through the global audience. It was a sound you could feel. The connection was made. The circuit was complete. Kash Patel flinched as if he'd been struck by lightning. "No," he whispered. A single word, a pathetic shield against a tidal wave of truth. "Your grandfather, Kashyap," Traoré said, the name now a hammer blow of intimacy. Lulu Patel. He worked hard. He built a new life. He gave his family the American dream. And I honor that. I respect his sacrifice. But in building the new, he tried to bury the old. He discarded the heavy bag. He forgot the oath. He taught his children that they were self-made, that they owed nothing to anyone. That their story began on the shores of America. He cut the roots of the tree, hoping it would grow taller in a new sky. But a tree with no roots cannot truly stand. It can only pretend to be strong until the first great storm comes. Traoré gently nudged the leather pouch across the table. It slid to a stop inches from Kash Patel's clenched fist. "This, Mr. Patel, is the storm." The explosion, when it came, was not one of anger, but of absolute psychic collapse. Kash Patel flew back in his chair as if pushed by an invisible force. "No, it's a lie. A trick," he screamed, his voice cracking, shredding into something unrecognizable. This wasn't the controlled fury of a political operator. This was the raw, terrified cry of a man watching his reality dissolve in front of his eyes. You dug this up. You manufactured this. This is psychological warfare. You're trying to destabilize me. To discredit me. It's a fairy tale. My grandfather was a businessman. A strong man. He was nobody's charity case. He was shouting now, his face contorted, red and blotchy. The mask of power had not just slipped, it had been incinerated. All that was left was the raw, quivering ego beneath. The little boy who was told he came from nothing, who had built a fortress of success around that empty space, and who was now watching the walls of that fortress crumble into dust. If you are feeling the sheer, earth-shattering power of this moment, the collision of two worlds on this single table, take a second and hit that like button. It lets our team know that these stories of hidden history, of truth against power, are what you want to see. Your click is a vote for truth. Because the most stunning moment, the proof that no one could deny, is coming next. Elizabeth Vance tried to intervene. Mr. Patel. Captain Traoré. But her words were lost in the gale of Patel's desperation. You think you can come here, Patel spat, pointing a trembling finger at Traoré, with your folksy tales and your little pouch of dirt and undo everything I've built? Everything my family built? We are Patels. We are lions. We bow to no one. We take what is ours. Ibrahim Traoré watched this eruption with that same unnerving, sorrowful calm. He did not react to the insults. He did not defend himself. He simply waited for the storm to pass. When Patel finally ran out of breath, his chest heaving, his eyes wild, Traoré made his final move. He reached out, his long, elegant fingers moving with deliberate slowness. He didn't touch Patel. He touched the pouch. He carefully, reverently, untied the leather cord that held it shut. The world leaned in. What was inside? Gold? A jewel? A document? He turned the pouch over. Into the palm of his other hand fell two small, simple objects. The first was a tiny, folded square of fabric. It was old, the colors faded, but the intricate pattern was still visible. A floral design, stitched with a thread that seemed to possess a faint, otherworldly shimmer. Even through the television screen, you could see it was the work of a master. The second object was a stone. A simple, gray, unremarkable stone. The kind you might find on any dusty road. The cloth of the artist, Traoré said, his voice a quiet anchor in the chaos. And the stone of the trader's land. The two halves of the promise. My family has kept them together for 100 years. Patel stared at the objects in Traoré's palm as if they were venomous snakes. His denial was a fortress, and he was desperately trying to hold its gates shut. It means nothing, he yelled, his voice hoarse. You could have made that. You could have found that anywhere. It proves nothing. You are right, Traoré agreed softly, a move that seemed to stun Patel into a momentary silence. An object is just an object, unless it is tied to a memory, to a word, to an oath. Traoré looked up, his gaze locking with Patel's one last time. And then he spoke. Not in English. Not in French. He spoke in a language that was thick with the dust of time. An old, provincial Gujarati dialect. He spoke only a handful of words. The sky and the earth are our witness, the narrator translates. The skill of the hand and the honor of the heart are two fruits from the same tree. The effect of these words on Kash Patel was instantaneous and devastating. It was not a logical process. It was something deeper. A key turning in a lock buried so deep in his subconscious, he never knew it was there. His frantic denial ceased. The wild look in his eyes was replaced by a vast, empty stare of shock. His face went slack. He saw it. Or heard it. A phantom limb of a memory. A lullaby his grandmother used to hum? A phrase his grandfather muttered in his sleep? A story told to him as a child? A story he had dismissed as the ramblings of an old man? He didn't know. But he knew it was true. The phrase was the key. And it had just unlocked everything. He didn't collapse. He didn't scream. He simply deflated. The air went out of him. The swagger, the confidence, the rage, all of it bled out onto the floor of the television studio, invisible but felt by millions. He sank back into his chair, his body heavy, his gaze fixed on the piece of cloth and the simple stone in Ibrahim Traoré's hand. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Not the ghost of his ancestor. The ghost of himself. The man he could have been. The part of his history he had been taught to discard, the part that held not shame, but a legacy of honor, of partnership, of art. The part he had traded for a hollow crown. The silence that followed was absolute. Elizabeth Vance, her face pale, finally found the words. "We need to take a break." The screen went black. The feed was cut. But the image was burned into the retinas of the world. The powerful Kash Patel, broken. And the quiet African leader, holding a piece of cloth and a stone, his expression not of triumph, but of profound pity. What we witnessed was not a political takedown. It was a spiritual intervention. It was a live, global lesson in the nature of true power. Kash Patel's power was external. It lived in headlines, in polling numbers, in whispered conversations in the halls of Washington. It was loud, it was shiny, and it was ultimately incredibly fragile. It could be shattered by a single sentence spoken in a forgotten tongue. Ibrahim Traoré's power was internal. It lived in his memory, in a story passed down through generations, in an oath kept. It was quiet. It was humble. And as we all saw, it was unbreakable. The world wants to tell you that power is dominance. That wealth is accumulation. That your past is a weight to be cut loose. That to be self-made is the ultimate prize. Kash Patel believed that. He built his entire kingdom on that belief. And in a few short minutes, we watched that kingdom turn to sand. His story wasn't a lie, but it was incomplete. He was a tree that had forgotten its roots and therefore could never truly touch the sky. He had Lulu's ambition, but he had forgotten Devji's art. He had the hunger for success, but he had forgotten the promise of partnership. What Traoré did was not an act of aggression. It was an act of profound, if painful, grace. He didn't come to destroy Kash Patel. He came to remind him, to offer him back the piece of his soul that his family had left behind in the dust of Gujarat. He was saying, this is you too. This strength, this artistry, this honor, this is your inheritance. Why did you settle for so much less? This event will be spun. It will be called a political stunt. A diplomatic incident. They will try to bury it in the noise of the 24-hour news cycle. They will say it was a humiliation. But don't let them. Don't let them miss the point. This was a story of humility. A story about the quiet strength of integrity. A story that asks each and every one of us, what are our roots? What are the forgotten promises in our own family histories? What part of our legacy have we been taught to discard? That is, in fact, our greatest source of strength. Kash Patel's life was forever changed. The reports that trickled out in the days that followed were sparse. He cancelled all his appearances. He retreated from public life. Some said he was broken, a man publicly shamed. But I choose to believe something else. I choose to believe that in the silence of his self-imposed exile, he was finally getting to know his grandfather, Lulu, and his great-grandfather, Devji. I choose to believe he was learning the lesson that Traoré came to teach him, that the house you build for yourself is only as strong as the foundation of history it rests upon. As for Ibrahim Traoré, he returned to Burkina Faso not as a conqueror, but as the leader he had always been. A man who understood that a nation's future is forged not just in its mines and its fields, but in its stories. He didn't win a debate. He reminded the world that our shared humanity is the most powerful resource we have. He reminded us that an oath spoken with honor between two men a century ago can echo into the present and change the course of a life. This story is about a hidden truth being brought to the light. It is a testament to the fact that history is never truly dead. It breathes. It waits. It remembers. And sometimes, when the world is watching, it speaks. If you believe, as we do, that these are the stories that matter, that these hidden truths have the power to change our world, then I ask you to do more than just watch. I ask you to join us. There is a link in the description below. Click on it. Join our community, our global crossroads, of viewers who are tired of the noise and hungry for the truth. Support our mission to tell the stories that get buried. The stories of honor, of integrity, and of the unbreakable threads that connect us all. Don't let this message fade. Become part of the movement that keeps it alive. Subscribe, share this story, and never ever forget the power of a promise kept.